Very special thanks to Cardiff Trade Sales for providing the Tesla in this review. As the name suggests, of course they are based in Cardiff, so if you're looking for a high-performance used car like a Tesla or a Porsche or a Bentley, but also maybe a more affordable daily driver like a hatchback or a sedan, then give them a look. They've got a broad variety of vehicles, many of which you can check out on their website down below. The timing on this review of the Tesla Model S is kind of perfect, because it was only a few weeks ago that I reviewed the Jaguar I-Pace, the higher performance 400 horsepower model, and although they're not necessarily as direct rivals as, for instance, a Model X would be in the SUV category, it still bears comparison because the electric car market is significantly smaller, almost on a first-name basis, if you will, compared to the vast array of petrol and diesel cars out there. That scope gets even narrower if you're just considering performance EVs rather than general ones like your Nissan Leaf and even hybrids like the Toyota Prius. So in the performance car market, an electric car can't just rest on its laurels. It can't just say, well, I'm tax exempt, I have no emissions, so give me all the awards. No, it has to be a good performance car as well. So how does the Tesla stand, first of all, on that merit? Then we'll talk about some of the practicality stuff afterwards. Well, in the case of this car, it's the P100D. It's a 2017 model, of course the facelifted car. This one's for sale for just over 50 grand. And if you think about it from that point of view, well, the spec is pretty incredible. In fact, years ago on the channel, I mentioned that there are certain vehicles which, for instance in racing games like Gran Turismo or Forza, the full range of what makes a particular car so good can't be fully experienced unless you drive one in real life. This is one of those occasions, because there are so many things about a Tesla which go beyond what it arguably could have gotten away with. So for instance, I don't think many people would have demanded that this car have the capability of 7 seats, but Tesla did that anyway. And that automatically makes it one of the best sedans out there because it's one of the only sedans that can do that. But then to move back to performance, of course they've always gone above and beyond, because when the Model S first came out, the top of the range was essentially a rear-wheel drive, around 420 horsepower model, and that put it on par pretty well with the unique, and more so hybrid than EV, Fisker Karma. Now the Karma is ultra rare these days, and you're still looking to pay, in the UK at least, easily 50 grand for a left-hand drive imported Fisker Karma. Now it's a fascinating car, and I like it quite a bit even to this day. But the thing is, that car stagnated. That's where it ended. The Tesla moved past it, so it's not even a rival anymore in that direct sense. Tesla added all-wheel drive, they facelifted it, and of course they gave it masses of power, masses of torque in comparison to what the benchmark of the Model S was originally. As I said, a 400 odd horsepower rear-wheel drive car, which had good performance for sure. Top speed was around 120, 130, which is pretty much what you'd expect from an electric car of the time. Now fast forward to this. Top speed is 162 miles an hour. The 0 to 60 is quoted at as low as 2.3 seconds. In practice, you're looking at about 2.7, 2.8, so in other words, on par with a Lamborghini Aventador. But I'll remind you once again, that's Aventador acceleration in a car with 4 doors, 7 seats, a hatchback trunk, and a boot in the front as well, called the frunk. Plus, just like the Lamborghini, it's big, it's heavy, it's well built, and it's all-wheel drive. So, in terms of performance, you could easily think, well, if a Lambo is about the same in terms of most of its straight-line performance, of course top speed notwithstanding, surely that means that conventional petrol or diesel engines are still better when it comes to performance. I would argue, no it doesn't, because the reality is the Lamborghini, for instance, has significantly more power than this Tesla has. This is a 670 to about 680 horsepower car, depending on who you ask, with 700 pound-feet of torque. That's close to 1,000 Newton meters. The Lamborghini has a lot more power than that. It doesn't have that torque, but it does have a lot more horsepower and, crucially, something like a Lamborghini or even most other supercars weigh a good 500 or 600 kilos less than this Tesla. That's literally half a metric ton. So the fact that with no gears, less power, The same all-wheel drive advantage as many of those, such as Lamborghinis, and significantly more weight to carry, plus being in a non-supercar category, it is just a sedan after all, albeit a high market one. The fact that it even comes close to their performance, and in many cases is on par and sometimes even better than them, I would say is pretty remarkable. Now that kind of stuff anyone can appreciate. The practicality side of things is to me where the Tesla Model S, especially the higher performance models, goes from being a good car to a great one. Now, the seats and the space are something that I've already mentioned. Of course, it's safe, it's well built. The fact that the battery pack is very low in the car makes stuff like rolling over through tight corners or in an accident very unlikely, but even stuff like running costs, range anxiety or lack thereof, which of course is still a hot button thing and probably something which puts a lot of potential electric buyers off from getting one, be it higher or lower performance. The fact is, Tesla moves forward all the time in that regard. This, for instance, has an independently verified 405 miles of peak range. Plus, to cap it all off, when I put it into a distance cost calculator to compare electric vehicles to conventional petrol or diesel cars, I decided to go extreme, to really put the Tesla at a disadvantage. So I selected this model, which of course having more power is bound to use more juice from the batteries, and I put it up against one of the most economical cars I've ever driven, the 2019 shaped Mercedes A-Class, in particular the low-end, really high economy A180D. Now that car, when I used it, had incredible economy. It was like 600 miles on 30 or 40 pounds of diesel. It was insane. But even compared to that, a car which is so much cheaper, it's basically the bottom of the barrel of that particular A-Class range, even that is £150 a year more to run than this Tesla. And that calculator was based on if you did 100 miles a week. So even doing 100 miles a week, 52 weeks a year, the Tesla is still £150 cheaper than that super economical diesel Mercedes. Except, I'll reiterate once again, this has 4 doors, 7 seats, 670 horsepower, 700 pound-feet of torque, it has the top speed of a Porsche 911, and the 0 to 60 time of a Lamborghini. Most of those things an A-Class can't match, even when it comes to something like boot space, which you'd think a hatchback or even something like an SUV or a wagon would be good for. Well, the Tesla's pretty great, and part of that is because it's a hatch. It's got around 800 litres of trunk space, which is really good for a sedan. In fact, that would be good for an SUV, let alone a sedan. Now, with all of this being said, of course, I'm not a simp for Tesla. I can acknowledge their mistakes and ways in which they're perhaps not as good. One of the things that's often prohibitive about a Tesla is the price. For a new one, you're looking at, 120, 130 grand, which is a lot of money for a sedan, especially one that doesn't look like a 130 grand car. However, that's when the used ones come in. This 2017 shape with modest mileage is 50 grand. So does it keep its value? Well, clearly not. But that makes it a performance bargain. And that much car for that much money is pretty remarkable. Once again, about the same price as that used Fisker Karma, which has no way near the kind of spec. In terms of the tech inside the car, of course Tesla has that distinctive 17-inch center display. That was a lot of fun to use. Of course you can personalize the car, you can change all the settings you want to have, you can have obviously stuff like sat-nav, and it's a great map. It's kind of reminiscent of using Google Maps or the maps on your iPhone, for instance. And another super fun bit of tech in the car was the very well done surround sound camera, if you will, but without the sound. Just cameras looking in every direction to classify the distance, of course, but even the shape and type of vehicles around you. Not down to the car mark, of course, but it could identify vans, larger lorries, smaller sedans, even bicycles, and would show that on the heads-up display in front, behind, to the left and to the right of you to really give you a feeling of where you sit on the road. Now all of this praise is not to say that there weren't things that I didn't like as much about the Tesla. So let's talk about those, because there were only 2 things in particular on a practical level which I wasn't as much of a fan of. One is the space. And that is not something which I expected to say, given that it does, as I've been saying, have 7 seats and tons of trunk space. That's absolutely true. However, I found the headroom to not be quite as good as I was hoping. You can kind of see from the interior view that yes, I do fit in the car, but only just. that kind of reminded me of more what I'd expect from a sports car in some cases. Now that's not necessarily bad for most people, most drivers probably aren't 6'3", but it is something to bear in mind if you are a taller guy like me. The second thing is kind of related to that, funnily enough, and it's about that heads-up display. Now, being a Tesla, and of course I didn't have days and weeks with this car to personalize everything, but it wouldn't surprise me if you could fix this issue very easily. I just didn't have the chance to do so. And that is that the speedo on the heads-up display was from my eye line, in other words, as a taller guy, right behind the steering wheel. So I literally couldn't see how fast I was going, unless I ducked down to look under the steering wheel to see that. Now, as I said, it wouldn't surprise me if you could move that lower, and for instance personalize the heads-up display. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, I can't confirm either way, but that was just something which kind of irked me. And to move past those two more practical downsides, you could say, at least for me personally, there is one subjective, very personal thing which I will say about a Tesla overall. I would say this less so about the Model X and even less about the original Tesla Roadster, but when it comes to the Model S and even the Model 3, and you could say Model Y for instance as well, they tend to be cars that very quickly you get familiar with the look of. And to me, I don't necessarily find them boring to look at, but they become kind of like my analogy of driving an iPhone. Everyone has one. It's the cool kid club. So if you do want to be on the cutting edge of the curve, well then yeah, absolutely a Tesla does offer that. For someone like me who actually appreciates more oddball or less expected choices, such as for instance your Fisker Karmas or Jaguar I-Paces, well then the Tesla might, for me for instance, and if you're like me, maybe go against that, because it is super popular. And the, I guess, hipster in me, when it comes to petrol or diesel or electric cars, kind of wants the less expected choice. For most drivers, you probably won't care at all about that. That was just, as I said, a purely subjective thing for me. Overall though, I think most of the raw numbers speak for themselves. The performance is fantastic, the range is great, and to top it all off, even something like charging time is dropping almost by the day, it seems. With a supercharger system, and there are over 20,000 of those worldwide, you can get 130 miles of range out of this battery in 15 minutes. Now, that's still longer than, for instance, filling up a car, but if you think about it, it's actually not that much longer anymore. If you drive into a petrol station, fill up the car, go and pay for it, maybe buy a couple of things in the shop and come back, that's easily, what, 5 minutes? Maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. This is 15 minutes to get 130 miles of range. The time difference between electric car charging and conventional fuel filling is getting narrower by the year, and that's something which I love to see, because the battery issues that they used to have are very quickly being resolved. And in fact, in a similar way to how the motorcycle world compares to cars in terms of technology accelerating so rapidly, I would argue that electric cars are actually advancing much more quickly than conventional cars have. Conventional cars have overcome a lot of hurdles and gotten better over the decades, and of course a century now that they've been around. Electric cars are accelerating way more rapidly than that, sometimes literally, but also when it comes to technology. And for someone like me who honestly doesn't really care about the emissions that a car puts out, I mean, if I did I wouldn't be driving a Touareg V10, to me, just on the side of cutting edge technology, futuristic performance, and having a car that feels pretty much like nothing else in its class, well, of course the Tesla offers so much to love. You don't have to be a quote-unquote greenie to love a car like this. You don't even necessarily need to care about the environment at all. It's just a cool car. It's alternative tech being refined more and more every day. And for me, the fact that it's so much more affordable used with an incredible level of spec, well, that just makes it even more appealing. Overall though, that's it for my thoughts on the Tesla Model S P100D, of course the facelift in particular. Doubtless we will revisit electric cars in the future here and there, so of course stick around for more like that. Check out my review for the Jaguar I-Pace as well, and until next time I'll see you then. So if you want to check out my other car reviews, click here on screen, and until next time I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.